Alright guys, this week we have an in-depth look at the Orange Dual Terror. Throughout the video we'll be switching between several different guitars, tunings, and amp settings to demonstrate the tonal diversity of this amplifier. All that's coming up here on episode 83 of Limitless Studios TV.
Alright guys, this week we have a full review on the Orange Dual Terror. Orange actually sent us this amp for review and we appreciate that. And we're going to try and do the most thorough job of reviewing the amp as we can. And later on, after we do sort of an overview of the amplifier, we're going to have a ton of clips with all kinds of different guitars. So you guys can really get an idea of what this sounds in a more recording style situation.
Yep. So this amp costs around $859 US. It is a 2-channel 30 watt, 15 watt, or 7 watt amp, and you can use like the 7 watts for studio use, and 30 watt is plenty enough for small gigs. And the advantages of this head over full-size heads is that this head is much lighter. It weighs at about 22 pounds and it's very portable, so that you can take it on and off stage really easily.
It's got 8 tubes in it, which is, I mean, the thing's packed full of tubes in such a tiny package. It's got 4 EL84 power tubes, and it's also got 4 ECC83 preamp tubes, and they're very comparable to a 12AX7, which most people are more familiar with. It also comes with a padded gig bag, so you can actually carry this in its little carrying case. You don't have to buy a case for it. It's really nice. It's actually a really nice case, honestly. It has a foot switch input on the back, but it doesn't come with a foot switch. You can get the 1/4 inch foot switch from Orange, and most 1/4 inch foot switches are going to work with this amp. It is 2 channels, and one of them is actually called the Tiny Terror channel. They also make the Tiny Terror. This is the Dual Terror. And you know, that's also an amp that you might want to look at because it's single channel. So if you want 2 channels, maybe look at the Dual Terror. If you want the sound of the Tiny Terror channel, the Tiny Terror amp might be something for you to look at. So now we're going to do some close-ups on the amp and show you how the wattage switches and the tube switches work. Alright, so we've got the front panel of the Dual Terror here, and I'm just going to go through and show you what all these knobs, switches, and so forth does. So your first switch here, this is your power switch. It's just a 2-position switch, on or off, very simple. Second switch here is where things get kind of interesting. The middle position, which is where the switch is right now, is a standby. So when you turn that amp on, you need to have that in the standby position because this amp recommends about 4 minutes of warm-up time before you switch it to an on position. Now, the top position is full. So depending on your tube selection, which we will get to in the rear of the panel, it's either going to be 15 or 30 watts. So if it's half power, it's going to be 15 watts in full, and if it's full power, it's going to be 30 watts in the full position. And if you switch it to the bottom position, that is half power. So if you have half the tubes running, this is going to cut the voltage to 7 watts. And if you have 4 tubes running, it's going to cut the voltage down to 15 watts. Then you have just your channel, your actual channel knobs. There's only 3 different controls per channel. You have volume, you have tone, and then you have gain. It's a very simple amp. There's not a whole lot of tonal changes that you can do. The tone knob is pretty powerful. You can sweep it from a very, very dark tone all the way to a very, very bright tone. But as far as your standard treble, mids, and bass, not on this amplifier. It's a very simple, very stripped down amp. Same controls for your settings here. And then finally, you have your input, and then you have your channel select, which your top is your Tiny Terror channel, and your bottom is your VAT channel. Now, switch it over here to the rear of the panel. These are your speaker outputs. You have 2 8-ohm outs and you have 1 16-ohm out for your speakers. Then this is the tube select switch, which is what I was talking about earlier. The top is going to be your 4 power tubes, so that's full power. That's all 4 of your EL84s going. And if you switch that to the bottom, that cuts the tubes to 2 tubes, so now you're running at half power. And this is your foot switch, which is optional. The amp doesn't come with the foot switch, but you can get an orange foot switch from Orange, or you can get just a standard 1/4 inch foot switch. And then there's your power adapter. So all in all, it's a pretty simple amp, but it's, as you're going to hear here in a moment, it sounds actually very excellent. So we're going to cut our guitar clips up into a clean, more of a rock distortion, and then the end will be several different clips of a metal distortion. So let's check it out.